Do you like The Breakfast Club? Did you like Final Destination? Then you might like Whistle. Whistle is the latest horror movie. It's directed by Corin Hardy. I looked it up. He directed The Nun from 2018. He has a few other smaller films to his credit, plus some TV shows, and then a lot of music videos. But the only thing I've seen his other work of was The Nun, which was not a terrible movie for a horror movie. I think the sequel is a little bit better. But this stars Daphne Keane as Chris Willett. She is from Logan, Deadpool and Wolverine, and His Dark Materials. And then there's Sophie Nélisse, who plays Ellie Gaines, and then Nick Frost plays in this as one of the teachers, Mr. Craven. A misfit group of unwitting high school students stumble upon a cursed object, an ancient Aztec death whistle. They discover that blowing the whistle and the terrifying sound it emits will summon their future deaths to hunt them down. That basically gives away the whole movie. I pulled that from IMDb. I usually try to write my own synopsises, but that was a little too on the nose, I guess. Anyways, the movie starts off with a basketball game. And actually, it starts off with a loud-ass whistle from the coach, which was extremely loud in the auditorium, and it happens a few times in the beginning. There's a basketball game. One of the main players, Mason Raymore, like the key player, there's his parents in the audience. There's recruiters in the audience, so they're trying to win their game. And as they're getting towards the end of the match, he sees something in the stands that freaks him out, and he's able to get through the game. And then he runs to the locker rooms, which in horror movies, I don't know why they always make places that are super bright in real life, kind of dim and dark. Like a locker room, to me, I would have envisioned being very lighted with fluorescent lights. It's very dim, and he's in there, opens his locker, and you see the Aztec whistle that obviously probably blew at some time, and you hear his death coming towards him. So it follows that he destroys it. He thinks he's rid of it, and then it cuts to the rest of the team coming in after the game is over. He's taking a shower and then combusts into flames. They attribute it to a gas leak, which doesn't make any sense, but it is a horror movie, so a lot of the deaths don't make sense. And then it cuts to 6 months later, where Daphne Keene's character, Chris, is moving in with her cousins, or her cousin Rel and his family, due to some unknown incident that occurred with her and her father. And so you start seeing her and her cousin go to school. As she's going to the locker she's assigned, you find out that this is the same locker as the basketball player who passed away, Mason Raymore. He has a couple teammates that come up with their girlfriends and some other friends, and they start harassing Chris and Rel. She ends up, kneeing him in the balls, and Mr. Craven, played by Nick Frost, shows up and sends them all to detention. Before they all go to detention, it cuts to, she's in the hall by herself. She hears something, opens the locker, sees the whistle on the top shelf, takes it, ends up going to detention. One of the other kids, one of the football or basketball players, Dean, is saying, "Hey, do we allow drug paraphernalia in here?" And Mr. Craven comes up. She indicates it's just we don't know what it is. I found it in my locker. And so they, in detention, start trying to investigate what this whistle or Aztec artifact is. They soon learned it is, Aztecian. And is that a word? I don't know. Mr. Craven, you can see that he's like, "Oh no, I got to confiscate this." Obviously, he's a teacher, probably doesn't make a lot of money. He sees, hey, maybe I can sell this. And so he dismisses the kids from their Breakfast Club-like detention. The reason I mentioned Breakfast Club, because it's a group of people who obviously don't hang out all the time, but he indicates they need to write a 6-page essay on, I forgot exactly what it was, Aztecan sacrifices or something, why they're studying this in high school. I don't know. They end up outside talking about meeting at Grace, one of the other students who's the girlfriend of Dean and who Rel also has a crush on. They're saying they're going to meet at her house so they can write the essay. There was no indication that they had to write it together, so that just kind of jumped in there just to get all the people in the same place. Well, Rel forgets something in the school. He heads back in, and between them talking outside, Mr. Craven posts the whistle on, Craigslist or some other site, trying to sell it. He wants to make sure it works, so he blows the whistle, and, some weird stuff happens in the room, but he doesn't die. right away. Walking out, and then Rail's coming back to get a comic book he left behind. He sneaks back into the room. He steals the whistle, and then later on, when they all meet up at Grace's house, he has it with him. And this is where I guess the movie kind of starts, jumps between them talking about the whistle at Grace's house, and then back to Mr. Craven, who's after school, looking at vacations when he sells the whistle, and then he goes to look and sees that the whistle's missing because it's inside of a case. Rail left the case, but just took the whistle. Mr. Craven starts hearing something. There's a janitor in the school. That's who he thinks it is. Eventually, some stuff happens in the school. Mr. Craven walks back to his classroom and ends up dying by the means of his own demise. Cut back to at the hot tub at Grace's house. They dare her to blow the whistle. She blows the whistle. Giant loud scream comes out. Everybody, all 5 of them, hear it. That's kind of where the story starts. And there's a drug dealer also in town who the kids get involved with a little bit. Mainly, he heard that Chris overdosed and is into drugs, so he's trying to sell her stuff, and that kind of comes into play a little bit throughout the movie. After they blow the whistle, they get uneasy. They all decide to leave Grace's house. There's an indication that Chris and Ellie are into each other. There's, some communication. Ellie invites Chris to the Harvest Fest, indicating the movie takes place around Halloween. The next day, they end up going to Mason Raymore's house, where his grandmother is, and they learn that it's a death whistle that supposedly summons your death. So once Ellie and Grace learn this, they go to the Harvest Fest where the other kids are. And this is where Grace ends up getting killed or dying of her old age. And this one, for the most part, the special effects in this movie were decent. This one, I noticed it was a little interesting because Grace dies due to old age. And so this ghost that's haunting her, or death that's mimicking what her death is going to be, is somebody. At first, the makeup effects look all right. But then you notice there's a few scenes where it definitely looks like a very skinny person and kind of this clothing outfit that's supposed to mimic old age skin. So it kind of threw me off a little bit. Death scene was not that great. There are a couple really good death scenes in the movie. This was not one of them. That happens. Ellie and Chris take Rel and Dean to the gymnasium, and that's where they talk about, what is going on, that, they're cursed with their death to come early. Dean denies this. He just thinks it's a hoax with Grace being killed. So he runs off, and then Rel wants to think, and he runs off and heads back to their house. Before the events of Harvest Fest, Ellie and Chris end up coming across the local drug dealer named Noah, who also happens to be a pastor at one of the local churches. So everybody thinks he's a good kid, but supposedly he sold some drugs and some kid died the year before. So there's a lot of people who do not like him. He ends up trying to start some stuff with Chris and Ellie. They end up, kicking him in the balls, and then Chris kind of cuts his nose with a knife, and he kind of gets really upset about this, and this comes into play a little bit later. You basically follow each kid slowly succumbing to their own death. The 2 best death scenes were one where somebody dies in a car wreck, which is super interesting, and then another one where one of them are supposed to die falling into a junkyard scrap machine, which was that was probably the best kill in the movie. There's some stuff with the drug dealer and some hostage situation that goes on in regards to how they learn how they can get rid of the death coming after them. You follow all that towards the end. Chris and Ellie, or Chris, figures out a way how they could prevent death from coming towards them without having to sacrifice somebody else. And the movie ends with them trying to fight death, and then the drug dealer basically getting himself involved in trying to go after Ellie and Chris, which ends up in the interesting way. Overall, the movie is basically Final Destination, but with a whistle, instead of people missing their plane or being on the highway when a wreck happens, or being at a roller coaster accident, barely getting missed by those. And so instead of death coming after them because they were supposed to die, it's more that once you blow the whistle, death is going to come for you much sooner than expected. There was some questionable acting in the movie. There was some weird ADR stuff, especially with Daphne Keene's character. And I think she's probably the bigger name in the movie, being from Logan and Deadpool and Wolverine. The drug dealer Noah is played by one of the guys from Wednesday in the first season, the one actor who got canceled and was kind of a shitty person. And then all the other acting was, it was fine for a horror movie like this. It was much better budgeted movie than some of the other stuff I've seen lately. I did enjoy it more than the Primate. The kills were much better than Primate. Primate was kind of mediocre in regards to the violence in that movie. So if you're into kind of generic horror movies with some decent kills, I'd recommend Catching Whistle at some time. You know, it is a Shudder production, so it'll be on Shudder probably sometime this year. And I would give it 2 stars. That is Whistle, the newest horror movie that brings Final Destination and The Breakfast Club together.